roaming down the tracks as I sit at the table of my father's home. I did not have a clue where next I would roam. Nowhere to live, nowhere to go. As I sat there on the table of my father's home. He did not raise me, and I did not know him well. His children were my siblings, but to me they lived in hell. I sat at the table and I looked out to the wheat fields as far as the eye could see. The train was going down the tracks slow. There was no mountains in sight. It's flat lands and the train going by. And I knew those songs and the sadness when they would sing. And that lone train went along the tracks. And that lonely whistle blow. And they made it sound like there was nothing lonelier than a train out on an open prairie. No houses in sight. As if back in the day on the first trains. But to me, as I sat at my father's table, looking at photo albums of people I had no idea who they were, and I didn't even care. And I would see a photo of my grandmother, my grandfather, and that would strike my interest. And I would look out from my father's table, as far as I could see the tawny wheatgrass, and watch the train. It felt so lonely. I felt so alone. And no matter if you're sitting right next to somebody or they're thousands of miles away, the relationship with them is in your own mind. The illusion of being alone when you look out at thousands and thousands of acres of flat wheatland to a train so far in the distance you can barely see it. There's this inescapable loneliness that comes over you. And that long whistle blowed. And all those songs about the trains and the tracks that went into infinity. And this was modern day. And there it was, the lonesome train tracks. And what it inspired in me, was it in my DNA? Was I born with that forlorn, deep grief and sadness at the train going by? Did my ancestors wish they could be on the train or wish for a different way? I don't relate to living on the plains. I grew up in the mountains, even though my father lived in the flatlands. He was a man I never knew. When I turned 21, I contacted him. We were in, we were out, never really close. Then about 2016, I decided to go over there again. I'd been living in a car for quite a few years. And I was just poking around in my past to see what would turn up. And I stayed in a double wide on the property of my father's home. Alone. I had my own little guest house, overrun with rats and watching the wheat fields. I'd go for walks and completely unfamiliar with my surroundings. I would go for runs, completely oblivious to rattlesnakes. Sit near rock outcrops, didn't even know till I left those are things I should watch for. Over there in eastern Montana, they say the rattlesnakes don't cross the tracks. We come upon this farmer, And we were talking about the rattlesnakes in the ranch, and he said, I don't got rattlesnakes in my place. I thought he was kidding. I mean, there it is, right there. But the rattlesnakes don't cross the tracks. How profound is that, right? And there I was sitting out in the field next to rock outcrops. Rattlesnake could have come up on me at any time. It's the kind of place where the deer and the antelope play. I didn't feel it. I didn't like it. I found it weird. You couldn't get away from the summer sun. There was no trees for shade. It's just endless wheat fields. And when they would come over to western Montana, it would be weird for them because it's like they're like the sun goes in and out of the trees and in and out of the trees and in and out of the trees. If I'd have been raised in eastern Montana, maybe I would have a love for that wheat fields after wheat fields with no mountains in sight and that long, lonely whistle blowing into the train. But I grew up in the mountains, and my brother and my sister was the mountains, the creeks, the trees, my family, my heart, my home. And to this day, if I can't see a mountain, be around pine trees, be in that greenness and know there's mountains around me, I feel insatiably unnerved. And there's no way I could have lived in eastern Montana. I would much rather live in a car in the Pacific Northwest. And then, of course, there's the drama. I'd say, well, I'd rather die in a car in the Pacific Northwest than live in my father's home. And that's a fact, Jack. And that long whistle blew. I had nowhere to go, and I did not know where next I would roam. But I knew it wasn't there. Hip hoppity skippity boppity. Didn't even barely give him a couple hours notice. Bought a train ticket. Left. All the way back to the Pacific Northwest. Got back in my tiny little truck in the front seat and went to sleep. And in my heart, that long whistle blows, and that loneliness. I'm sitting there at my father's table. People I could talk to all over. I have 1,000 cousins in that area. It's pretty weird. But I didn't feel it. I didn't feel at home. I felt more at home with my knees to my chest, fitting in the front of a tiny truck. Because I was in the Pacific Northwest, in the mountains, in the water, and the relationship that I had with the air. And to be able to see a mountain is what I needed to survive. And that long whistle blows. In my heart to this day, I'm sitting there at my father's table and I'm looking out at this really big window. It's just me at this table by myself, looking out, wheat field after wheat field after wheat field, seeing the train in the far distance. So lonely, so sad. Where are they going? Where can I go? Would it be the train that I would take to leave town? Was it the train I came in on? There's something about watching the train in the distance on flatlands that invokes something so sad. I can't quite figure it out. But I know that I do not belong in my father's house.